Hello and welcome to this Madison Civics Club Forum featuring a talk from and with Madison Police Chief Shawn Barnes. We'll be discussing his policing philosophy, where it came from, police policy reforms, and racial justice. I'm Joy Cardine. I'm the co-chair of the Madison Civics Club, and I'll be your host and moderator today. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our MadisonCivicsClub.org website. We will take your questions for Chief Barnes after his presentation. Please type them in the Q&A feature and I will share them with him. After the Q&A, we will be presenting our first youth grant of the 2021-22 season to the Youth Action Summer Intern Program at the Lucier Community Education Center. So please stay with us to hear more about that program and how it benefits the participants and the community. When the group applied for the grant, they asked to have the opportunity to attend and participate in this forum because, as they wrote on the application, racial and social justice have been at the core of our conversations with teenagers for years. We've had a lot of participation around Black Lives Matter movement and would be really excited to hear from a BIPOC Chief of Police, Black, Indigenous, person of color, BIPOC Chief of Police, on how he thinks the community police relationship can be improved. All right, so let's get to it. We invited Chief Barnes to share with us his vision for the Madison Police Department and what he is doing and wants to do to establish more trust between the police and communities in Madison. We'll also learn about his policing philosophy and his assessment of police policy reforms underway in this era of social justice. Chief Shawn Barnes was hired as Madison's Chief of Police in February of 2021. Previously, he was Director of Training and Professional Development for the Civilian Office of Police Accountability in Chicago. He was the Deputy Chief of Police in Salisbury, North Carolina, and a captain with the Greensboro, North Carolina Police Department, where he began his career as a police officer in 2000. He is a nationally recognized leader in crime reduction and community police relations. He is a council member on the National Police Foundation's Council on Policing Reforms and Race. Throughout his career, he has implemented neighborhood-oriented policing, which focuses on smaller police beat response, police neighborhood ownership, and community engagement. Chief Barnes, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Joy, and thank you to the Madison Civics Club for reaching out. I always feel like it's the best part of my day when I get to interact with our community. I think that's the biggest part of my job. I think that the police department should always reflect the needs of our community. So if our community calls on us, we should be there in any capacity. So we're going to get started. I have a presentation that we'll go through to help guide make sure I'm on the right one, to help guide my thoughts. Okay. Joy, can you see that? All right, great. Well, again, my name is Chief Shawn Barnes. I have the distinct pleasure of being the police chief of the Madison Police Department here in Madison, Wisconsin. I wake up every morning believing that I am the luckiest police chief in the country. I feel blessed every day to walk to work knowing that I achieved my dream of being a police chief in a very progressive, forward-thinking community. Sometimes in policing, or in your chosen profession, you may feel like an outlier, as if you're the black sheep of the family. And I've felt like that from time to time in my career, but not here in Madison. I do feel like this is home. I feel like this is a good fit. I love the conversations that I've had with our police officers. And before I go any further, let me say that I always want to thank the men and women, the brave men and women of the Madison Police Department. I really believe that they work very hard every day to ensure your safety. I ask that you offer them your thanks if you have an opportunity to, and your prayers if you so choose to do so. So let's get started. All right, let's try it again. All right, here we go. All right, so let's look behind the badge. I was asked to say, talk a little bit about, how I came to my personal policing philosophy. And it really is more about who I am as a human being than it is about anything I've ever really been taught by some of the great mentors that I've had over the course of my career. So let's take a little journey before we talk a little bit about philosophy or strategy. On the left with the brown shirt, the young man with what appears to be some type of caterpillar over his lip is my ability to, or my effort to grow a mustache to make myself look older. Now at the age of 47, I try to make myself look younger. So it's funny how that happens. But this is the first day of my really career as a police officer. This is the last day of the police academy. And in this picture, I'm presented with my badge. The following day, we would have graduation where you move from the brown shirts to the black shirts. And, I remember this day so vividly because on day one of the academy, they always say, well, why do you want to be a police officer? And 99.9% of the people will stand up to say, because I want to help people. And for me, it was true. For me, it was my purpose or my call. Before being a police officer, I was a public school teacher. I taught high school US history and world civilization for 4 years before moving on to become a police officer. I had an opportunity to help kids as a teacher, and now I wanted to expand that to something greater. I do believe that the purpose of life is to find your talent and use that talent to help other people. I think the Creator gives each of us something, and He gives us something so that we can make lives better for other people. And so I'm so appreciative of the opportunity that I had in Greensboro to do that. While in Greensboro, I served there for 17 years. I served a really great department, a nationally recognized and accredited department. I served a department that believed in experimentation, that believed in doing things different, that believed in being progressive. And I had leaders who pushed me to be better than I thought I could be. And so that's what I bring. One of the things that I bring to Madison is I'm always optimistic about the potential of people. I'm always optimistic about our core mission, and that is to provide fair and equitable services to everyone. While in Greensboro, I had an opportunity to be a school resource officer, which was a natural progression for me. I often get asked about school resource officers in schools. I do support school resource officers in school because I was one. And I know that the work that you do will really never get acknowledged, but the work that you do is so vitally important. There are many stories that I could share with you about how, as a police school resource officer, you help kids that quite frankly are in situations that no child should ever have to see. From there, I was a detective. I worked in juvenile victims. I also was a sergeant on night patrol, which I absolutely love. To mold and mentor a young group of police officers is probably one of the greatest joy. I went up the ranks and finally ending at a captain rank. I was a captain over the training division. At that time, I met a gentleman who had some issues with police community relations in his city. That city was called Salisbury. He also had some issues with crime. He reached out to me. We had a great conversation, and that conversation led to him offering me a position. And the position was deputy chief of police. I accepted that position, which for me was scary, to leave the familiar and move on to something unfamiliar. But in order to be successful, you have to take risk. And so I did that. So the second picture is me and my little brother. Just in case you're wondering, I am taller than he is. I remind him that all the time. But this is my little brother who's also a police officer. So the connection here is that at the time, my brother is a police officer in Asheville, North Carolina, who at the time, a couple of years later, would have a chief of police job open. And I did look into that, and that led me to Madison, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But nevertheless, so my little brother is a police officer, so we are blue bloods. I have one younger sister who is a daycare provider. And so, my family is just all about service. That's the way our parents raised us. And I'm very proud of the fact that, we chose to go into professions where we want to serve other people. The picture at the top of me walking is a picture that was taken about a year ago in Alabama. After George Floyd, the George Floyd situation really touched me deeply. There were other situations, but we had planned, myself and two of my friends, to go to Selma, Alabama, to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and kind of look through some archives and try to get to understand the root of white supremacy, the root of what's going on with police and community relations. And if you're familiar with Bloody Sunday, you know that that stands as probably one of the worst examples of injustice ever exhibited by police. We kept putting it off, and then George Floyd happened. And we determined or decided that we needed to go and get this knowledge. So we traveled to Selma, Alabama, went to Brown AME Chapel, and sat with the pastor and had an opportunity to go through some archives. I have an undergraduate degree in history, so I was really happy about the opportunity to kind of unpack things firsthand. And then we embarked on the 54-mile walk from Selma to Montgomery. And, along that walk, I learned so much about our community, about our world, about our country. One of the things that I learned is that we're not as divided as the media, as special interests may want to portray. While walking in the August Alabama sun, you learn a lot. You have a lot of time to reflect. It's important to note that there were so many people who stopped to check on us, to offer us water, who didn't know why we were walking, but was just curious and wanted to know how they could help. And when they heard about what we were doing, three police executives, they really were impressed. And so we had people who stopped who were white, Black, male, female, you name it, young, old. And so this is America. Madison Civics Club, I'm here to tell you that America is not the divided country that people will want you to believe. Yes, we do have our issues. Yes, there are things that we could certainly clean up. But this is still a country and a community, by the way, that I'm very proud of. I'm very proud to be an American. I'm very proud to be a member of the Madison community. And although we have differences, and some of those differences are rooted in historical injustices, my definition of community policing, of community engagement, is that we learn how to set those differences aside. And if we can't do that, then we roll up our sleeves. We do the tough work of acknowledgement and reconciliation. But it's worth doing that because we have to move forward. I think about 9/11 as we have recently celebrated the 20th anniversary. It should not have to take a tragedy to pull Americans together. And so when I talk about community engagement, when you see me out in the community and doing things like this, it's because I want to build those bridges. And a bridge has to be built from both sides. And it's tough work. There are some doors that have been slammed in my face during the course of my career, but I've never let that shirk me from my duties. And Winston Churchill once stated, courage is the ability to go from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. And so that's what I bring to Madison. We have a tough road ahead of us with reconciliation because there are those that want to divide us, maybe for their own purpose. There are those who think that our divisions can't be fixed, but hopefulness is a big part of community engagement. If you do not have that, you're going to have a more difficult time. And so by your presence being here today, willing to listen to me and engage in conversation, I feel energetic. I feel enthused about what we can do as a Madison community. The picture at the bottom is my tribe, my family. To the left is my daughter, Ash. I always say my daughter. I always have to, I don't know why I do that. Our daughter, I guess fathers and mothers know how that goes. Our daughter, Ashley. Ashley is a graduate student at Cal Arts in Santa Clarita, California. She is studying to get a master's degree in dance choreography. She was living in Brooklyn, working for a dance company, a traveling company, and then the pandemic hit and they were not able to travel and perform. And so she decided to go back to school. This is her last year, and then we'll figure out what's next from there. But she's a lovely child. She's, I thank God that we haven't had any issues with her. She's just been absolutely great. And all my kids are, I think, daddy's girls, but that's okay. This is my son, Aiden. Aiden is in the 6th grade. He loves basketball, one of the kindest kids you're ever going to meet, except for his little sister. If I could keep those two from going after each other, I would get a Nobel Peace Prize. But he's a great kid, loves to read, is into anime and anything superhero related. It's me in the middle. And then next to me is my daughter, Addison. So it's Ashley, Aiden, and Addison. I did it again. Our daughter, Addison. Addison is, she really is a daddy's girl. You will be hard pressed to find a photo where she's not directly next to me. But she's a wonderful kid. She plays soccer. If you saw my swearing in February, you saw the braces on her legs. She had some major surgery on both legs. And, I'm very proud to report that she is back playing travel soccer, and she doesn't even remember the issues that she had with that. So, that's definitely, I think a blessing, and she's just a great kid. In fact, she has a game now, and I'm sure I'll get some updates as soon as this meeting is over. To the far right is my wife. Her name is Dr. Stephanie Dance Barnes. She is the Dean of the College of Health and Science at DePaul, the smartest person that I know. And that's not simply because she married me, but because she has a PhD in cancer biology as well as toxicology. She works to help prevent breast cancer in women. And, I honor her by simply saying that breast cancer is something that doesn't just affect women. It affects us all. And so she does great work. My wife went to Wake Forest University for graduate school, and then she was at the Lineberger Cancer Institute on the campus of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So I do have to root for the Tar Heels, so don't be upset if you see me with a Tar Heel hat on, because it gave my wife an opportunity to learn more and to research her passion, which is breast cancer prevention. The picture to the, far right at the top is special to me. This is my mom at 19. She has a 2-year-old adorable son who's me. not pictured, but this is in Madison, Wisconsin in 1976. As you know, I am from North Carolina, but I have roots here in Madison. My uncle, Lorenzo, was a pastor, young pastor, associate pastor at Mount Zion here in Madison under Reverend Wright. My uncle Lorenzo is a graduate of UW-Madison and lived here his entire life. He recently moved to Merrill, Wisconsin, and if I mispronounce that, I apologize. But he recently moved to Merrill, Wisconsin about 3 years ago, bought some property up there. His son, my cousin Gerald Barnes, still lives here. He works for UPS. So I do have some roots here in Madison. This photo I found when I was telling my mother that I wanted to apply for the position. And it was interesting that she pulled this out, and I had seen the picture, but I had not realized where it was taken or the story behind it. And so she came here to find a better life, but was not financially able to do so. And so, you know, a Greyhound bus from Wisconsin to North Carolina, she returned and lived, and she's doing well down there in North Carolina. The picture at the bottom is my dad. My dad passed away in 2018. He was a small business owner, so I do have a big heart for small businesses. I think that they're the lifeblood of our community. They provide services. And most small business owners, I'm sure there may be some on this call, they actually, I believe, value people over profits. That's why I think they're the lifeblood of our community. When I went home in 2018, in January, my father passed away January 8th, which is my son's birthday, actually. I went home and began the process of preparing my father services. I also had to reconcile my father's business. And as I was reconciling his business, I noticed that my father did not spend any money for advertising. And I began to think about that, right? Just sat back in his chair and did some reflecting. How do you raise 3 children, put 3 children through college, 2 police officers and a daycare worker, raise a home, pretty successful business. My father wasn't, you know, Elon Musk or anything like that. He was just he just wanted to do good work. How do you do that and you don't advertise? Like, how do people know about you? Like, how does that happen? And what I realized is that my father mastered the true definition of trust. My father had trust in our community, and the community had trust in him. My father didn't need to advertise. He was a mechanic, had tow trucks and things of that nature, and some body services. But the reason you are able to do that is because people trust you. My father always gave more than he asked for in return. Something that I learned, something that I use to establish trust in this community and every other community that I've ever worked in. My father certainly gave away more than he ever asked. And some of our later conversations where we argued about his bookings was about why are you not charging more for your services? And he said it's because our people can't afford it. This community, I know this community, and I'm here to provide a valuable service. You know, my father mastered the art of establishing relationships with people. He knew everyone's name. He took time to talk to you. And people came to my father because they knew he would never charge you for anything that you didn't need. And sometimes in the automotive industry, that is not the case. And so I learned those lessons from him growing up, not even realizing it. And I take those with me as I embark on my career here at the Madison Police Department. Just a little bit about who I am and where I come from. So take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about Madison. So this is kind of what goes through my brain. This is what I promised the Police Fire Commission when they asked me the question, who are you and what are you going to bring to the Madison Police Department? And the first thing is neighborhood-oriented policing, something that you heard in my bio. I felt like I was a good fit for this police department because we have neighborhood-oriented officers. We have neighborhood officers in this police department. That's something that I established in 2 other police departments. So I felt like it was a good fit. Action listening is something that I came up with to describe what happens after a meeting, right? I often say everyone has homework after a community meeting. Action listening simply means that I'm committed to responding to our community needs. When we get together and we talk about crime or we talk about what happens after the meeting, I want to make sure that I am demonstrating, my officers are demonstrating to our community that we will respond and show you the results for what you asked for. Partnership policing is very important. Whose responsibility is it to prevent crime in Madison? I repeat again, whose responsibility is it to prevent crime in Madison? And the true answer is that it's everyone's responsibility. We just have the subject matter expertise to do it. Everyone is responsible for making sure that your vehicles are locked. Everyone is responsible for speeding. We often get speeding complaints in neighborhoods. They say, we want more officers to do speed enforcement. This is nothing uncommon. This happens in every community in America. And police show up and then they write tickets to people who live in the community. And I always thought that that's not necessary. Let's talk to our community members. Let's establish our own culture in our community that we don't speed through our neighborhoods, that we value our kids, we let them play. And if a ball rolls into the street, we shouldn't have to worry about a speeding vehicle. Let's change the culture of speeding in this city. We can do that. And then technology. I've been preaching technology for many, many years and often on deaf ears. And now that we have a pandemic, technology is essential. And so let's keep that momentum going. Years ago, if something were to come up, we would not be able to have this meeting. But now we have Zoom and Microsoft Teams. We have almost all these venues and all these avenues for communication. I want to make sure that we're using technology to the best of our ability. And that may mean, by the way, to reduce the footprint of police in certain communities who feel that they have been over-policed. My strategic priorities, as I mentioned on day one, simple: crime prevention, not just responding to crimes, not just taking people to jail, not just apprehending criminals or working with people who have been adjudicated, but crime prevention. That's very important. I want to measure the difference between how we look last week, last month, last quarter to a 3-year average and also to a yearly average. I think that's very important. So I will go ahead and give the disclaimer that crime is down in Madison. Crime is down in Madison. But what is up is the way we communicate. And that's part of our community engagement. I want to make sure that everyone in Madison is aware when something happens, because quite frankly, it helps us to understand that we do need to lock our car doors, that we do need to be aware of our surroundings. And so what is up is our communication and our community engagement. And by doing that, it feels as if our city is less safe when indeed it's not. Later on, I'll talk a little bit about fear of crime. Employee safety and wellness is very important to me. As a member of the Pillar 6 Employee Safety and Wellness Group with the President's 21st Century Report on policing, I understand that if you do not have employees who are in sound mind and body, you're going to have a difficult time getting the performance from them that you need. So I need your help. I really do. When you see a police officer out, take the time, if you feel comfortable, to give a fist bump or wave or let them know that they are supported. I will tell you, it goes a long way. This year to date, I have lost 42 police officers. Half of those officers have been to retirement, but the other half have been to resignations. Now, not all resignations are created equal, but some resignations have been because they don't think that our community supports the police department. They don't think that our elected officials support the police department. So I've been working really, really hard with community members to change that narrative. I've been working really hard with elected officials to change that narrative. And so I think it's very important that we do that. Crime prevention, some of the things that we're working on, and I'll go through these and so we can get into some questions, is looking at patrol beats and sectors to make sure that those boundaries align with communities. We're still working on that. As you know, we'll be taking on the town of Madison. So we'll have some opportunities to look at where our people are. Looking at stratified policing, which is neighborhood accountability. Looking to reorganize the department. We've had some new and exciting promotions. We have a new assistant chief, which is former Captain Brian Austin, who's doing a great job, and leadership development. This is something that, quite frankly, I've heard not only from the lower level or the patrol level officers, but also from the community. They want this. They want our leaders to be developed, and so I'm looking at some leadership development programs because I think that leadership starts day one in the academy, and it goes throughout your entire career. In my personal and professional opinion. Let me go back to this picture. So there was a young lady who was bringing in some things to give to some police officers, and she had the two kids and the baby, and she was struggling, and I was like, "Can I help you with your boxes?" Or actually, I said, "Can I help you?" And when I did, she expected me to grab the box, but I grabbed the baby instead. And so she's like, "Okay." And I was like, "You know what? You go ahead, you go back and forth to your car, and I'm going to babysit for you." So I had the baby, and the baby was just peaceful and quiet, and it was just amazing. The kids were with her, and then when we got done, I asked her if I could take a picture of those cute little kids. But that was the cutest group I'd been with. It made my day. Cute little baby. And then I went home and I said, I told my wife, I was like, "You know what? I saw this great baby." And she said, "Don't even think about it." But cute baby nonetheless. Strategic priority 2, obviously, is community policing, the hallmark really of the Madison Police Department. Community meetings, that's what we do. That's what we're doing now. We need to look at our protest protocols, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, and looking to build community trust and accountability. I think those two go hand in hand. You cannot have trust without accountability, and so we're working to develop that. We've implemented a youth advisory board. We partnered with American Family to provide stipends for some kids, and they meet with me once a month. And they help advise me. I ask them questions about how do you connect with the kids? What do you think about school resource officers being taken out? What can we do to make you feel safe? And they give me good advice. And then they have a project. And one of the projects that they're working on is TikTok videos about how to deal with a police officer. I'm so excited about that because I know nothing about TikTok, but I understand it's very, very popular. So if we can do some really great videos that people can look at, I think it'll be great. And then the child development community policing model is a long-term strategy that I have. And what that program does is it uses the police department to provide services to children who witness violent crime, who witness trauma. In this country, we sometimes ignore people who witness trauma, especially kids. And what do we know about hurt people? They hurt people. And so if we can be the first point of contact to connecting a child to services, I think that will be excellent. So, employee safety and wellness, talk a little bit about that. I think that our non-commissioned staff needs some reorganization. I think they need additional resources as well. So we're working to do that. In my budget proposal, I have some civilian or non-commissioned staff additions. Creating listening sessions, we do that internally with my chat with the chiefs and a couple of other things that we do. We do wellness checks here at the police department, which is part of the ORI report, with actually a licensed clinician, which is great. And we have multiple modes for expression. You can write into the chief of police if you want to. We have a virtual suggestion box. We're bringing back the police officers advisory board. We do a chat with the chief. I do ride-alongs every other week, and I attend lineups at least once a week. So we're trying to create that voice for our officers to express to us what they need from us as a police department. And then finally, some next steps. The 90-day strategic plans have been completed. The data is being analyzed, and the final presentations to me is at the end of this month. We are re-energizing our neighborhood foot patrols. The Control Center, which was studying the after action of the protest, is complete. And then we've made those promotions that I mentioned. For the future, I'm trying to reorganize to create a police reform and innovation section, a community-led strategic plan, which we're working on now. I'm so excited about that. I talked about the child development policing model, and the future of this department should include body-worn camera implementation. It's best practice. It does save money, and it's one of those things that if we were to ever be forced to reform, body-worn cameras would not be an option. So it's best to work those bugs out on your own before we're forced to do that. All right. I think I have stopped sharing my screen. Hopefully that was 30 minutes. May have went a little bit long. I was trying to get through all of that. And so I wanted to save time for some questions.
You did a great job. Thank you so much. So if you have a question for Chief Barnes, you can put it in the Q&A section, type it in there, and I will present it to him. We did have Lee, who entered a question earlier that you did address briefly during your presentation, Chief Barnes, when he was asking about whether you supported the concept of school resource officers. And you said yes, and that you were one. Just talk a little bit more about why you think school resource officers are important, and your reaction to Madison pulling them from our schools. And please address critics who say that maybe a police presence in the school is not necessary, and that it could escalate tension.
Yes. So I support school resource officers in schools. School resource officers are the best of the best. I've always said that anyone can be a police officer, but not every police officer can be a school resource officer. School resource officers are handpicked, hand-selected. They go through additional background checks. They go through additional testing. They go through additional interview panels to be chosen. For people who say that police officers shouldn't be in schools, they're not understanding that they're not in school as police officers, but they are in school as resource officers. And so you have to understand that the nomenclature matters in this particular situation. Police officers in schools are there as a resource because sometimes we don't understand some of the nuances that the law requires from police in responding to certain incidences. And sometimes we don't understand some of the more civil ramifications that happens in schools. For example, custody issues, issues of domestic violence, issues of sexual assault among parents where the child is the victim and that parent is not to visit the child. Uh, those things happen. I'm sorry to say that, but they do. And when a parent comes on a campus to see a child, and then the secretary could be out that day, or it could be a fill-in, or the secretary may not be aware, the school may not be aware. These things happen. I mean, these are all things that I've been through as a school resource officer, and I've had to pull parents away who were, quite frankly, there um, against the law to see their children. And that's not something that's comfortable. And it takes some training, and it's above the resource of a principal, quite frankly. And then there's the issue of being a quick resource without having to take away from the other students. And so, yes, principals can break up fights, and they should. Police officers shouldn't do that. Principals can respond to students who don't have coats in the winter. They can do all these things, but police resource officers can do that too, without having to pull away from some of the other things that they're doing at the time. Their intention is not always divided. Yes, there are times when police officers have been seen applying force. Sometimes that force is reasonable. Sometimes that force is not unreasonable, but it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't reflect the general work that school resource officers do on a daily basis. And so it's sometimes difficult dealing with young adults whose brains are not developed and who do not want to do what they're told. And sometimes it does take an authority figure to negotiate with them. I'm not suggesting that use of force is appropriate, but sometimes that negotiation with an authority figure, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I do think that police and schools do more good than harm. And if something were to happen and your child was involved, who would you want to be there to respond to that? We just live in a different time. We want to associate what we went through with what's happening in 2021. And I've heard people say, well, when I went to school, we didn't have school resource officers. We had a principal, Carter or whoever, and that person was probably amazing. But things have changed just a little bit in 2021. And the key is we're just here to help. So I hope that answers your question.
You ended with reforms like police worn body cams, and saying that it's time to implement that in Madison. Talk a little bit more about that. Why? And what about the objections from some that we shouldn't spend money on body cams when it could be better used on other public safety reforms?
Yeah. So microeconomics tells us that there's always an opportunity cost to every decision. And I think we know that. But if you actually look at the data, if you actually look at the report on implementing body-worn cameras that was completed by the Police Research Executive Forum, what you find is that those cities with body-worn cameras, there is a benefit, a cost benefit to actually having body-worn cameras. For example, when a internal affairs investigator has to investigate a case, and you can look at a body-worn camera and determine whether or not that complaint is substantiated or not in a matter of minutes, as opposed to 2 days, you save money. Because every time, every hour an officer has to do something, there's a cost associated to that. When you look at the frivolous lawsuits and sometimes unfrivolous lawsuits that are levied, the body-worn camera sometimes tells the story that this did or did not happen. And so instead of spending $10 million to settle a lawsuit, you can look at the body-worn camera and determine if the officer's actions were justified, reasonable, and correct. If they were, that's $10 million that you're saving. You can always always use money or move monies for something else. You can say that about changing oil in the police cars. Well, if we didn't change oil in the police cars, we could use that money for something else. But it's necessary to have that because we need vehicles to get to people who need us. And so the body worn cameras is an evidence based practice that shows that you can reduce the cost to your police department from man hours worked, from lawsuits that may be frivolous, and you can use it if you use it correctly to establish trust. There's as many cases of body worn cameras being used to establish trust as there are cases where you think you saw something on the camera, on a video that was wrong. And so it's really not a fair argument to point to one side of the body worn camera issue. I can think of one case from North Carolina involving a school resource officer, by the way, where the cell phone camera showed about 5 seconds of an officer allegedly taking a student to the ground for trying to walk off campus. And everyone was in an uproar. And then the police chief said, no, enough of this, and put out the entire body worn camera. And actually it showed the student wasn't even taken to the ground, actually. And so the community, for the first time in my career, apologized to the police department for making that assumption. I have that. I can send that to you, George. If you want to send it to your group, I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen a press conference where ministers stand with the police chief and apologize for overreacting. So think about what that saves your community if you were to have protests, if you were to have student walkouts, if you were to have civil unrest. But because the police chief said, hey, let's show the whole story on our body worn cameras, she was able to create trust instead of destroying trust.
If you have a question for Chief Barnes to our attendees, we have plenty of time to get to them, and you can put them in the Q&A section of the webinar. Well, one just came in. Madison recently created a civilian police oversight board. How do you see that entity supporting and improving the police department? Have you worked with that model in your other positions?
I have not worked with that model. The model in Chicago is a bit different because it's an entire, it's a 200-man organization that has a professional development and training component to it, which is what I ran. The model that I'm familiar with, they are civilians, but they learn constantly so that they make good decisions based on what the law and the policies of the department is. Our civilian oversight board are community members who, to my knowledge, does not have a recurring training component to it. And the independent monitor, the person selected may or may not have experience or even knowledge of police work, right? That's just the facts. How do I see myself working with them? I have committed myself to being transparent to every member of the community, whether you are on a board or not. I'm not sure who asked that question, but I will say to you, sir or ma'am, I've gotten in trouble before because I went to a community meeting to talk to community members, and one of our many boards, I didn't go there, and they was like, "Hey, we're appointed," and I said, everyone is important to me in Madison, and if someone calls me and they say, "Hey, can you come talk to my church group?" and I get there and there are 5 people, and then at the same time, one of our very important boards is upset because I didn't show up. I'm sorry, I have to apologize for that. I just believe that everyone has a voice and everyone is important. So I see them as a benefit to us because I believe that when you open the hood, and you look under the hood of the Madison Police Department, you're going to see a department that's forward thinking, progressive, and really values all community members. I think you're going to see a department that is constantly improving every day. I think you're going to see men and women who, quite frankly, more times than not, back away, back up, de-escalate. And I think I'm going to use this board, this independent monitor, as my voice. And so if I don't hear them telling the story to its full ability, then you'll hear me. Then you will hear from me. But as they present to our community, I will be expecting that they will present the good and the bad. But if it's good and we are in the right, that's going to be the voice that you will hear, followed by my voice. And I think that's very, very important to establishing trust.
Another question from one of our attendees: what kind of training is used to prevent racial profiling? I still hear of many people of color complaining about being pulled over for, quote unquote, driving while Black or brown, or for trivial or specious offenses.
Mm-hmm. So there's no training that I'm aware of, or anyone else that's going to tell me, that's going to stop a person from being racist. There's no training that's going to take that out of you. Dr. Martin Luther King once said, you can't change the hearts of a man, but you can legislate the heartless. And what he meant by that is we do have policies, rules, and procedures in place to ensure that if there is a complaint of racial profiling, we investigate that complaint to the fullest extent. We also have an early warning program that will alert us if an officer is engaged in any type of repeated activity, whether it's repeated complaints, whether it's an officer who is only pulling over women, or only pulling over men, or only pulling over whites, or only pulling over Blacks. I had the opportunity to study racial profiling when I was in Greensboro. That study led me to graduate school, where I earned my PhD, and my dissertation was in understanding racial profiling and how it affects communities, especially when it comes to community police relations. Part of the dissertation is your chapter 2, where you do your literature review. And in reviewing the literature, it's consistent that when someone believes that they have been racially profiled, it's usually because of the way they were treated. It's very difficult to know if the officer activates their blue lights and sirens because you're Black, but it's not difficult to determine how you're treated. And so we work on things like procedural justice here at the police department, which is a great training. We work on things like implicit bias, voice, community policing. But when it comes to racial profiling, if someone believes they were pulled over because they were the color of their skin, there's the legal ramifications to that. Was the stop lawful? And U.S. versus Wren, Wren versus U.S., I apologize, Wren versus U.S., a 96 case, Supreme Court case, says that as long as the stop is valid, the motivation of the officer doesn't matter. I think they probably would have written that differently had we had more studies on racial profiling. But when someone feels that way, it's usually because the way they were treated. So if you go through the steps of procedural justice, where you give voice, you allow them to speak and explain to you what's going on, you treat them with respect, you treat them with dignity. And then the most important part for racial profiling is decision neutrality. If you explain to the person that you pulled over, hey, I pulled you over because you have a tail light out, and it's my practice to pull people over with tail lights to give them a warning. Is there anything I can do to help? Yeah, I don't know how to fix it. Let's take a look, or maybe you can go here, you can go there. But currently, currently we're not pulling vehicles over for equipment violations. It's only safe movement violations. That was a mandate that came down from the governor due to COVID and some of the regulation violations that people couldn't pay due to being out of work. So if that is happening, I would encourage that person to contact us because it could be another part of that story. I'm just not sure.
We have another question. Please discuss your department's preparedness to assure that protests are safe for participants and observers.
Yeah, so we're doing that Catron study now. Once again, continuous improvement. The set team has been replenished. We lost some people who are on our set team. This is a team that is dispatched for protest. They have annual, bi-monthly, I believe, training days to ensure there's some equipment needs that we have. I received an email today from one of my assistant chiefs asking for a piece of equipment that we'll need to kind of keep people safe. It's a mega handheld megaphone that we can use to give pre-warnings to not only just the protesters or demonstrators, but people who may be bystanders or may be going about their business. Currently, we don't have anything like that, right? And that's something that we could use to keep people safe. Hey, no rocks, no weapons, things of that nature. We don't have that, and I have to figure out how to pay for it. It's a tool that, quite frankly, could help calm down protests. It could help us negotiate with people. It could help us educate people. If we have to make an arrest in a crowd, letting the crowd know, hey, you're not allowed to throw rocks or light fires. If you continue to light fires or throw rocks, you will be arrested. Sir, you with the red shirt on, please extinguish the fire. Like, it gives people information, and it's a great tool that we don't have. And I have to figure out how to pay for it. But I will figure it out because, quite frankly, it's certainly worth it. So to answer that question, we are training. I believe it's bi-monthly. We are constantly looking over our strategies. Please make yourself familiar with the Madison Way to know that we allow people to protest. We try not to get involved. We also partner with people in the community to be safety watchers. And then some protesters bring their own. But these are people who, when they see things that they know will affect the protest, they get in there and they say, hey, what are you doing? You shouldn't be doing that. And then we don't have to do it, right? And that's something else that we're doing as well. I will say, knock on wood, that the protest frequency has decreased. And I think that's due to the community collaboration that our officers who are on the ground every day is engaged in. I don't take any credit in that.
An email came to me prior to the forum with a money-related question, asking whether the Madison Police Department can function efficiently with a 5% budget cut as ordered by the mayor for all city departments and agencies. Especially of concern to this emailer was that the city of Madison is absorbing a portion of the town of Madison and thousands of more residents, I believe. I don't remember the exact number.
Yeah, it's about 5,000 new residents that will be welcoming to our community. Fitchburg will have some of that, not the 5,000, but they'll have some of that, the territory. I apologize. I've asked the mayor for additional officers, but that was not included in her budget instructions. So it should be important to note that the mayor's budget instructions were to all department heads to submit a 5% cut. A 5% cut would drastically change the way we do business. In fact, the entire blueprint of what we have established for so many years would have to be changed. Would we still function? Absolutely. It just means that some of the preventive functions that we have, some of the functions that I believe helps to keep people away from jail, away from your home, away from your car, would go away. And that would be devastating to crime prevention. As you saw in one of my slides, crime prevention is what we're here for, not to just respond to people who call 911, but to prevent crime. And so a 5% cut would grossly affect that, almost eliminate that. Now, I have not read and or seen her operating budget. I do not know if that will be a reality. It may be an exercise. So I don't think that the word mandate, I think as used in the email is appropriate. It's an exercise that I went through, and I think in a couple of weeks, maybe 2 weeks, we will see what those cuts are. But remember, it is the city council that ratifies the budget, not the mayor. So once it is proposed, if there's something about it that we don't like, the next step is to go to our alders, your alder, and tell them what you support and what you believe. Certainly, once that budget is released, people will ask me that question. And so I will tell that person, ask me that again once it actually comes out, and I can give you an answer with a more definitive.
A couple more questions I'd like to get in the best of all possible worlds, how many more police officers should Madison have? An attendee wants to know.
I can't answer that question now because, we certainly have, 40 plus vacancies that we have to fulfill. I can only tell you that there's no police chief in the country that's going to turn down more help or more officers, and including me. I think we need to get back to full strength. I think we need to reevaluate what I think is the appropriate metric is how many officers do we need to give our patrol officers 20 to 30 minutes of free time to do crime prevention? How many do we need to do that? Now, there's some things we have to take into effect when you're looking at that formula. The first thing you have to take into effect is that we're still under some COVID police response protocols. So we're not going to every police call right now because of the social distancing and mask mandates and things of that nature. So some of the smaller things that people would sometimes call for, we don't have that data. So that's why I can't answer that question right now. The other thing to consider is that not every police officer works at the exact same time. And currently, although we have a number of vacancies, we also have a number of officers who are on light duty for various functions, who are on military leave. Some just came off of maternity leave, and some are about to go on maternity leave. So it's a very complicated formula. And unfortunately, I couldn't give you that answer at this time.
How do you respond to those who call for defunding the police, and what does that call mean to you? And let me add, what is your response or reaction to the effort to have more community responses to certain situations, like having mental health professionals go to a place where there might be someone in mental health stress causing some problems?
Yeah, as I travel throughout the community, this comes up a lot, and it doesn't come up the way you think it does. When people tell me defund the police, they go, and then what, Chief? What do we do then? So it's almost like defund the police is an incomplete sentence. That should be something that kind of comes after that. And it's certainly not, social workers, which are great, and they help us out. But there are some calls, unfortunately, that require police response. I am a big proponent that if it's something like mental health and it's a civil issue, you just need help. I really like the fact that for the last 8 years, we've had mental health officers, and people don't know that in Madison. We've had mental health officers. The new CARES program, I support that program. I think it needs to be expanded a bit, and anything that helps to take the pressure off of police is great. But this is what I would tell anyone who says defund the police because we don't want you showing up to this or that. You don't need to defund the police to do that. Just show up. there's nothing that says you can't walk your community. There's nothing that says you can't be your own community watch. There's nothing that says you can't tell a young person, hey, what are you up to? You shouldn't be doing that. You know, I'm a community member. This is our community. So, you know, I don't know that taking money from the police department just to establish other forms of government control makes much sense to me. Um, and quite frankly, I think that if you want, we have to have police, okay? And if you want to have a great police department, you have to invest in them. One of my, I guess, infamous or famous sayings is that good police departments are expensive, but the most expensive type police departments are bad police departments because they're underfunded, undertrained, and under-equipped, and they make mistakes which cost citizens money in lawsuits. So in order to have a great business, you have to invest in that business. We're no different.
What trends have you seen in crime in Madison? What areas, types of crime are decreasing? You mentioned that crime was down, but the communication was up.
Yeah, I think, you know, once again, you know, crime has decreased, but some of the trends that we're seeing is in the obviously the stolen cars. They're fishing for guns, but it's all what we call soft targets. And what soft targets means is that they're not trying to break your glass to rifle through your car. They want the door to be open, to be unlocked, so they can go through your car quickly and then leave. We have surveillance videos of some of these groups, and they're out late. They're on bicycles. They are, you know, they put the bike. They don't even try to hide the bike. They just lay it in the middle of the road, and then they start opening car doors. And on one of these videos that I saw from a surveillance camera, they pulled the gun out, and the guys almost was going to slap high five. They were so happy. And once they got that gun, they rode away. They were gone for the night because they had reached their objective. Cars are not gun safes. Do not leave your weapon in your vehicle with your vehicle unlocked. We need to get a little bit better at that. I do like that you feel safe enough to do that, but I would prefer that you lock it. For those of us who have garages, try to put those down at night. It's interesting to note that I found this out from a victim, that he now has a new garage door. It's not a new door, but it's a new sensor that you can buy that it will automatically put your garage door down after it's been up for over 30 minutes. So if you forget to leave your garage door up, this sensor will kick in and it'll shut your door down. I thought that was a pretty cool little invention. So if you're looking for something, maybe look into it. I don't endorse any product, but you may want to look into that. And I think as cars become more sophisticated, I think eventually the stealing of cars will kind of go down as well.
Let me ask one last question. There have been a number of police policy reforms that have been in the spotlight in the news nationally, statewide, and locally, from banning of chokeholds to limiting the use of tear gas and many others. What reforms do you welcome for the Madison Police Department? What ones are unnecessary or of concern to you?
Yeah, I submitted a press release. You may want to send that out, but it was a year after George Floyd, and the Police Executive Research Forum listed a group of reforms that everyone asked for. And then I said, well, you know what? Let's do a report card to see where our police department stacks up. And quite frankly, we did very, very well. Probably I would give us an A+. First of all, chokeholds have always been banned in Wisconsin, except for the use of deadly force. And we actually have a policy against that. So we have that. Another reform is duty to intervene policies. We have always had a duty to intervene policy, which was good. Body-worn cameras actually is a reform post George Floyd. And this is where we get an A- because we do not have body-worn cameras. Another reform is qualified immunity, which people think it means that if you're a police officer and you do something wrong, you can say qualified immunity and you can't be sued. And that's actually not true. Qualified immunity does not protect officers who violate your rights or violate the law. So qualified immunity is like a conversation that we're having that really doesn't pertain to the type of officer that we don't want on our police department. Now, we have a good officer who's doing the right thing. We want that person to be protected from a frivolous lawsuit from someone who says, well, I just don't like this person, so on and so forth. So we certainly have to be cognizant of that. Trying to think of other reforms, tear gas. So we do have a tear gas policy, but our tear gas policy is only related to using it in situations where life or death, or we're trying to save someone. And so, my personal philosophy about tear gas is that I can't see a situation where I would want to use tear gas on protesters. It would have to be deathly dire to do that. I think it's something that looks horrible. It's not what we want for our community. It's not what we want for Madison. But in the event we need it to protect the lives of people, it could be considered. But I'm not telling you here today that it's something that I would entertain.
Thank you so much, Chief Barnes. If you can stay with us, do, as we briefly turn our attention now to the Madison Civics Club Youth Grant presentation. The Madison Civics Club awards grants to community and school youth groups for up to $500 to support their civic activities that contribute to the civic health of our community. Today, we are very pleased to present this grant to the Lusher Community Education Center, especially for its Youth Action Intern Program, or YASI. Joining us to tell us more about the Youth Action Summer Intern Program is the Youth Programs Director for the Lusher Community Education Center, Julia Robles. Julia, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.
So tell us about the Youth Action Summer Intern Program. Why is this, what is it? Why is this important for the youth participants and the community in general?
For sure. So we have a club that runs during the school year called Youth Action. And then during the summer, we run the Youth Action Summer Internship, where youth actually have to apply to be a part of it. And it is a great program. It's for high school students, and it involves a wide variety of things, but really what I think at the heart of it is realizing that our young people want to have skill development and want to leave high school as prepared adults. And so this involves identity development and exploration, leadership and communication skills, job skills, learning how to navigate high school and how to be an advocate for yourself. It involves learning how to do research about things that are interests to you. And so at the end of that internship, we also do a delegation trip. And so we have gone to Atlanta before, Detroit, Washington, D.C. We had to take a break when COVID hit in 2020, but this summer we went to Milwaukee, so kept it a little bit more local. And with those trips, we connect with other youth organizations, see museums. Unfortunately, the young person who couldn't make it, she was on a DC trip where they actually prior to did research on immigration rights and presented that to a Wisconsin representative in DC. And so it really also is tailored to what is of interest to the youth. So we've had during Youth Action during the school year, we've had them create workshops that were of interest to them. So one year they created a workshop on intersectionality to present to teachers. They've created a workshop on gender identity. So it's a wide variety of things that are based on what they're interested in, and also connecting with other youth organizations and bringing in partnerships. We're hoping this year to connect with True School in Milwaukee, and they do empowerment through art. And so that's a really cool program. And we're also hoping to do some connect with other youth groups in the Madison area to do some service projects.
It sounds great. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for joining us. And yeah, we're sorry that something came up and our youth action participant was unable to join us today. But normally I would send or I would be presenting you our $500 check for the Madison Civics Club Youth Grant at this time. But instead, I hope someone can take a photo of the Zoom screen, and we will just tell you that your check is in the mail. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much for this grant. We are excited for the opportunities it's going to provide us this year.
Wonderful. Thanks to Julia Robles. Also thanks to Madison Police Chief Sean Barnes for being a part of today's Madison Civics Club Forum. If you would like to know more about the Madison Civics Club, view past or look at future programs, or learn more about the Youth Grant Program, including how you can apply for one, or maybe encourage someone else to apply for one, go to our website, MadisonCivicsClub.org. Our next forum will be on November the 6th, Saturday, November 6th at 10 a.m. We are going to hear from Wisconsin State Journal editorial cartoonist Phil Hands. We will see some of his work too, and we'll talk about the role of the editorial cartoonist when it comes to influencing and changing public policy. We are going to open up registration for that virtual program in early October. The Madison Civics Club Board decided to keep programming free and virtual this fall due to the ongoing concerns with the COVID variants. If our public health conditions improve and we are able to safely get together as a group in person for our traditional brunches in the spring, we will do that. And at that time, we will ask you to pay some prorated dues to cover the cost of food and overhead. Until then, we will Zoom. And on behalf of the Madison Civics Club, I'm Joy Cardine. Thanks for attending and hope to see you soon.